I want to get this right, so I'm going to be reading off of my laptop. This video tosses out every interpersonal and professional relationship I've tried to build in this industry. It will alienate me. It will outcast WODDITY and the business I've built around that brand name for the last 2 years. Every late night of writing, recording, and editing, it will succumb to and be crushed by the old boys club that is CrossFit and the media teams reporting on it. This video specifically calls out high-level individuals at the pinnacle of our sport and our community, but it would be wrong for me to not say anything about this. If you're not familiar with the George Floyd situation in Minnesota or the subsequent protests around the world, I'm glad you're here for this conversation. If you want to watch a brief but graphic recap of what happened to Floyd, I've put a link to it, to a Washington Post article in the show notes that will help you understand what's going on. George Floyd had the police called on him after a shopkeeper suspected he had been given counterfeit currency for a purchase Floyd made. Footage shows officers respond, confronting and handcuffing him. For a while, views of what transpired are obstructed, but footage from a bystander who started filming shows us a horrific scene. Floyd begging, "Please, I can't breathe," while an officer crushed his throat with a knee. While officers called for a medical team, the officer in question kept his knee on Floyd's throat, even after Floyd appeared to be unconscious. Bystanders tried to step in. The officer's knee remained. Paramedics showed up. The officer's knee remained. More than 8 minutes pass of Floyd being suffocated before the officer in question removes pressure from Floyd's throat. Floyd is placed in an ambulance and later declared dead. In February, I ran a diversity special on the WODDITY podcast. I invited CrossFit. They told me I was gaslighting. I invited prominent members of former media staff. Some agreed to participate, but then disappeared when it became time to contribute. I reached out to more than 30 CrossFit athletes. Some read the invite and didn't respond. Some responded positively and then disappeared when it came time to participate. And some just blatantly ignored the request. I reached out to hundreds of CrossFit affiliate owners, and in a survey, very few thought the community had a diversity problem. This week, someone reached out to me about the George Floyd situation and asked, based on my previous diversity special, if I was going to talk to my community about what was happening. And I'm ashamed, because my response was that I no longer thought my community cared about what was happening. And then John Woolley from Make WODs Great Again posted something to his famous Instagram account. It was a picture with the question, "How are the CrossFit Games different than other sports?" The picture on that post was of a Crest noticeably white toothpaste label. Woolley's caption to the post reads, quote, "Very few in the CrossFit space seem to be willing to discuss race and the tragedies that are currently happening, so I will. We have a diversity problem, and it starts with us using our voice and actions to support our fellow man against injustice. Only then will we have truly created an environment that is welcoming and inclusive of all. Let's be willing to have the conversation, really listen to outside viewpoints, and most importantly, stand against discrimination when we see it." End quote. One of the top comments on the post is what inspired this specific video. It was from Talking Elite Fitness host and Morning Chalk Up contributor Tommy Marquez. Tommy wrote that he made sure to often discuss racial issues. Well, unfortunately, Marquez was on the list of media members I invited. He accepted, and then he disappeared. Rick Stevens is a popular sports photographer. He accepted, then disappeared. Easy Muhammad is a CrossFit Games athlete. He accepted, and then disappeared. But now it's all of a sudden popular to talk about these issues. So Marquez chimes in. Suddenly he cares enough to participate. Easy Mohammed takes to Instagram about the nightmares he has about race relations in this country, and he asks, quote, "What if it were me?" So to Easy, I wish you had talked to me about this 6 months ago. Maybe we could have started some change in this community. To Tommy, I've never really doubted, I have never doubted that you're a good guy and that you wholeheartedly care about the community and its diversity. And that's specifically why I reached out to you. Jonathan Haynes from CrossFit Incorporated, when I approached you about CrossFit joining in on this conversation, you wrote me that I was gaslighting and that it wasn't a topic worth discussion or even relevant to our community. Yet this week you write on Twitter, quote, "Anyone can join in on despising and working to eradicate racism," end quote. That's true, Jonathan. You can work on it too. Zach George, I reached out to you. Yesterday you posted, quote, "Empathy is not enough," end quote. I agree with you. You could have taken action too, but you're only making time for this now. Ant Haynes, Brenda Castro, Steph Chung, Tola Moraquino, Dre Strom, Chandler Smith, China Cho, Jason Kalipa, I reached out to all of you. Where were you when it mattered? Why does this matter now? Why didn't it matter then? I've lived in some of the poorest neighborhoods of the Mississippi River Delta. I've gone to a historically black college. Protests marched 2 blocks from where I live in Brooklyn. My college roommate and his closest friends from that era of my life, my closest friends from that era of my life, are all intimately impacted by these issues, which is why I've always made it a priority to talk about them. And why it cuts me so deeply now that these things are happening. And people who didn't care when it wasn't popular are talking about it. I started my week thinking the community didn't care. And now I'm finishing my week thinking the community did care. It just wasn't popular enough to be worth their time. I'm angry, I'm disgusted, I'm sad, and I'm embarrassed. Matt Chan tweeted a picture of a protester with a sign reading, quote, "If you're neutral in situations of injustice, you've chosen the oppressor."